Second. Okay, so we're live now. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the broadcast this evening. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Moderator.
How are you this evening, sir?
Well, fine, except that I can't see you on the screen. There is some block that is playing on my screen, blocking you.
Oh, I'm sure I'll get the team to have a look at that almost right away, sir.
Okay.
And we'll sort that out right away. I'm sure that would be a minor thing.
It's been sorted out.
It's been sorted out. Oh, fantastic! Thank you.
Now I can see you. You've got quite an efficient team there.
Oh, well, we try to do our best to please the excellence you deserve, sir. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
This week, sir, I want us to start from Africa, because last week we ended up discussing South Africa, and the stance that South Africa had taken. And there's been quite a lot of development over the last few days on South Africa. But one thing that came to mind and the team pointed out is the fact that over the last 2, 3 months, 4 months, there has been a lot that's been happening in South Africa, even way back to the war between Ethiopia and the Tigray people. There was a summit that was held in South Africa to look for ways to bring peace, and it yielded some results at the time. And I want to start with the question, sir. What is South Africa doing right regarding their foreign policy? Last week, we talked about some mistakes they may have made. But what are they doing right? And what makes South Africa a sort of fulcrum where people feel that it's the right place to go to?
Well, thank you for that question. From the time of the anti-apartheid struggle, there has been this conception that South Africa was not only the moral representative of Africa, but it was the moral representative of the world. Of course, this has to do with the nature of the anti-apartheid struggle, the personality of Nelson Mandela, and after the struggle was over, the kind of compromise that the ANC worked out with the Western world and the white regime in South Africa itself. They saw the need to prop up Nelson Mandela, since he had shown that he wasn't going to be a Robert Mugabe, that the assets and investments of the white community were going to be preserved. So South Africa then continued to play on that. And it was unfortunate for Nigeria that the release of Nelson Mandela coincided with the tail end of the military regime in Nigeria, but the tail end that was characterized by a viciousness which Nigeria had never seen before. And Nigeria became a pariah in the international community. So it was easy to then build up South Africa for South Africa to fit into that role. At the return of democracy, or should we say the return of civilian rule to Nigeria, again, we were unfortunate to have had a leadership that was more interested in promoting itself than in promoting the country. And so you had, the seat of the African Union Parliament being conceded to South Africa. South Africa let it be known that it was not buying into this understanding that big African nations will not vie for the chairmanship of the African Union, and that was going to fight for it. whereas there had been this understanding between Nigeria, Egypt, that we wouldn't bid for. That's South Africa will have none of that. And South Africa went in for it and won. So in a way, Nigeria ended up really with nothing in as far as the African Union was, the African Union was built up, apart from our leader, taking the praise that's one of those who engineered and helped Colonel Gaddafi for the transmutation of OAU to AU. So, and Nigeria has suffered from a lack of leadership when it comes to foreign policy. Really, in the past, 16 years, and South Africa has just fitted into the vacuum, and in spite of South African problems, which she has, even with her own leadership, problems with Zuma, problems with Thabo Mbeki, and even problems with Cyril Ramaphosa. It's like they've managed to draw a dichotomy between their domestic problems and their activist role on the foreign scene. So it's not as much that South Africa was doing anything, superlatively right, as the fact that she simply had no competitor for the leadership of Africa, and she simply stepped into the into the vacant steps of African presence on the international scene.
All right, sir. Thank you for that. Can I just check? I saw a note of someone having issues with audio. Can I just see, if possible, a show of hands? If audio is okay if audio is not okay, let me do it that way. If audio is not okay, can you just raise your hand so I can see? Okay. Just bear with me, sir. I saw someone say that audio. All right, I'll have the team look at that as we go on. One question, sir, that I want to put to you is the news that the South African president broke earlier on in the week, that he had spoken to both the Russian and Ukrainian presidents, and both had agreed to a meeting with a delegation of African heads to discuss a possible plan to end the war. What role do you think, sir, that African heads can play in helping to end the war in Russia? Do we have any leverage at all?
No, we don't. First of all, let me say, because this issue I know is bound to be raised, so let me address the elephant in the room. Why is Nigeria not on the list of the delegation? I don't know whether we were invited and turned down the opportunity to be a member of the delegation, or whether we were not even consulted, whether there was this feeling that, well, Nigeria is going to have a change of leadership. Let's allow the new leadership to settle in before um, Nigeria then steps into the fray, so to speak. But I am not, while I understand the absence of Nigeria on that list, I am also not too sure that there is not a feeling of what Germans called Schadenfreude, which means, some people are happy about our problems, our own uneasiness, and while they be pretending to understand, they are not too, they are not too, they are not too uncomfortable that we are in the verge of our transition, because they could have reached out to the president-elect and asked for his understanding. After all, some of the people who are close in the inner caucus of the president-elect were present at the World Bank meetings, the last ones held. And the World Bank delegates understood that the Nigerian delegation was a mixture of the outgoing and the incoming representatives of the incoming administration. Anyway, whichever one it is, we are not there. It is not because we are not there that I am demarketing the Nigerian, demarketing the South African sponsored peace mission. Don't forget that Senegal, as chairman of the AU, had actually gone on a mission last year, I presume, and nothing came out of it. Macron has gone, not once, not twice, several times. Nothing has come out of it. As I keep saying on this platform, the atmosphere is simply not right. Both of them are at that stage where you can't tell who is winning, who is losing. You can't tell whether Russia feels it has inflicted enough damage on Ukraine for Ukraine to make concessions. So this is just a waste of time. But people, there are scholars of conflict resolution who will take issues with me. And they'll say, well, it doesn't matter. Any peace initiative deserves to be welcomed as long as both sides are prepared to entertain interventions by men and women of goodwill. The two governments will not be meeting the delegation at the same time. So Russia said it's prepared to meet them in Moscow, and Ukraine said it's prepared to meet them in Kiev. So this is just a question of listening to their proposals, being being polite, to say, well, we'll study this proposal, and we'll get back to you. After all, President of Ukraine just came back from Rome, where he met the Pope, and from their conversation, I could read in between the lines of the of the communique issued, it was, Ukraine saying to me, yes, it will accept prayers from the Pope, but it will not accept any intervention that does not include an acceptance that Moscow will vacate all occupied Ukrainian lands. And now it has added two words which at the beginning were not there, but it has now added two words, including Crimea, which even now makes any makes any intervention, any possibility of a breakthrough uh, at this moment impossible.
Thank you for that, sir. Before we leave South Africa, one of the events that has happened recently was the Pan-African Parliament Summit. And that summit was addressed by President William Ruto of Kenya. And he received a standing ovation at the end of the speech. I don't know if you saw the speech at all, sir, but I'd like to hear your comments about that speech and then pick a few things if you had it.
Yes, I saw it. I heard it, and I said to myself, well, they do give standing ovations, don't they? As long as it's not a program of action which they have to implement. You know, it's funny, from time to time, Africa throws up visionaries, messiahs. He did it with Murtala Mohammed. He did it with Nkrumah. He did it with Thomas Sankara. He did it with Rawlings. And he did it with Gaddafi. And as I listened to critical aspects of that speech, which basically was saying, this is how Africa can change its position from being a victim now to a position where she will use what needs to be done to elevate its position. And I said to myself, it's good, but would they allow Africa to do this? Would they even allow him to pursue this messianic program for Africa? Usually the West knows what it does with African leaders that it feels have been too adventurous in diminishing the diminishing the stranglehold of the global North, because it's not just a question of the West now. I mean, China has to be considered as part of those who now have a foot on the African neck when it comes to exploitation of minerals. Would they? I mean, what they usually do with those leaders is to get rid of them. If they feel that those leaders are, making too much wave, we know from Hillary Clinton herself why they had to get Gaddafi assassinated. because the man wanted to use the gold mined in Africa as the currency of international trade. Wanted of course he wanted to do a nuclear program, and he was pushing hard for African unity, not by words, but by the program established by Kwame Nkrumah in the 60s. And she said so. She said, well, we have to get rid of him. And the day he was killed, she gave an interview. We got him. That's what she said, with a glee in her eyes. So and some will say that the day Murtala Muhammad made that speech in Addis Ababa of Africa had come of age was when he signed his own death warrant. So I hope President Ruto of Kenya, one, will be consistent in his message, and two, will watch his back.
Thank you, sir. Let me now take us let's talk about Russia and Ukraine, because there's an interesting development that some people had reached out to me, and they said they'd like to hear your view on. And I think that this is probably linked to some point you had made earlier in terms of how President Putin was dealing with the Wagner group and the fact that they had been put forward. We're seeing quite a significant shift in the war, with the support that is coming from other countries, the UK and the Netherlands promising jet support to Ukraine for them to use in their counter-offensive and some of the activities going on there. Sir, are you seeing a major turning point in this war in favor of Ukraine?
No. Let me start by saying I haven't changed my position as regards the modality of the war diplomacy that NATO countries is playing. Why are you announcing this equipment? Why? You never catch Russia announcing what equipment it is going to, what armament it is going to use against Ukraine. They simply go ahead and do it. It's only after they've done it that where analysts will now be saying what type of cruise missiles they've used, what type of short-range drones had been involved in this, and so on and so forth. But NATO countries will give Russia 6 months, 9 months notice of what they're going to give Ukraine. So it never catches Russia by surprise. Now, surprise is one element in warfare, and I haven't seen anybody. And please, if we have people on our platform who can explain to us what is this kind of war diplomacy, because I know there are people on this platform who had gone to the College of War Studies in London, and in the Sorbonne, and other kind of thing, who perhaps can explain. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, and behind times when it comes to understanding the nature of of the war or procedure that NATO and the United States are using. That's the first point to be made. Second point is it's Netherlands who announced that they are prepared to make F-16 jet planes available to Ukraine. In fact, the statements from number 10 Downing Street is that Britain wasn't prepared to go that far, although they were prepared to supply them with some sophisticated and modern weapons. So we are still not there yet in as far as F-16 weapons are concerned. But the anti-ballistic missiles dome, obviously they are in place. They succeeded in providing air cover for Ukraine. One of it was damaged, but the latest news is that it can be the damage is minor and that it can be repaired on the spot. I didn't even know that's about $1.6 billion for one. That they wouldn't need to ship it all the way back to the US to be repaired, that it can be repaired, on the dot, on the spot. I think it is early days yet to say whether we've reached a turning point in this war. Russia is still inflicting, to me, egregious damage on Ukraine, even now. And Ukraine itself says it has to get its act together before engaging in its own, whether it's spring offensive or summer offensive. And that, to me, is a message Ukraine is sending both to the West and to Russia that it intends to use surprise as an element in the war. And that's not going to broadcast it to CNN or BBC when it is going to. To me, it's a slap down on CNN and BBC that keeps expecting that on their program is when the Ukrainian High Command will be announcing what they're going to be up to in the war.
One important point that also came up earlier on in the week was the fact that 3 Russian academics that had worked on the hypersonic missile were being arrested, and they had serious accusations against them for treason. Number one, what message does that send to the scientific community? And number two, is that Russia somewhat agreeing that there might be failures in their hypersonic capabilities?
No. First of all of them do it. I'm sure the Chinese put a tab on their scientists. The Americans put a tab on their scientists. They probably monitor their phones, get them to sign all kind of undertakings. And I'm not surprised that Russia also does. This may be, there have been some suggestions that there is a fifth column operating within Russia, and that some of the accidents, if one could put it that way, that the Russian Air Force has been having is due actually to the activities of the underground in Russia rather than aerial activities by Ukraine. Maybe this is a confirmation of that. But it also could be, again, some element of what they call flag operations. In other words, Russia is looking for an excuse for some of the failures that it has had in this war. And rather than claim that actually it's because the Ukrainians are being smart in their counter offensive, oh, it is due to, counterintelligence activities by Russian scientists or Russian officers. I mean, when you couple this with what the Wagner Group is always saying, that the Russian officers are not professional enough, that the Russian high command, sits in their dachas drinking vodka. They should just be given AK-47 and sent to the war front. Then they will understand what fighting was all about. Excuses being mounted for reverses suffered in the field. That is really what I would expect more of this to happen. And and if executions start after secret trials of officers, of scientists, I mean, those are just collateral aspects of war at times.
Let's move over to President Biden. He's recently cut short a trip to Australia due to domestic challenges in the US, while at the same time he's been the second US president to visit Hiroshima ahead of the G7 summit in there. Firstly, cutting short the trip to Australia with the Quad team coming together to discuss issues that impact that region. How do you react to that?
Well, it's the kind of thing that the United States does just to prove that it is still the big boy on the block. I doubt whether really the United States will accept that kind of behavior from any other head of state in the world, maybe from China and maybe from Russia. But, countries go to considerable expenses, energy, everything to lay on a summit program and then to have it canceled at the last minute because you have to go back in order to address the issue of debt ceiling, which had been hanging for the past 6 months. It's only the kind of thing the United States will do and not understand that that others who are pissed will be pissed off by that kind of behavior. And the United States cannot understand that some of the things that it does are what drives other countries to the other side. Saying, well, I don't know, I don't see where I have to accept this from you anymore. I could have accepted this from you 6 years ago, but not now. But the United States will do it because it still sees itself as the top dog in global affairs. I don't think it speaks well of American diplomacy for the US to do this. I don't think so. If it's a major tragedy in the United States, like maybe a nuclear explosion, or maybe flood affecting a major state in the United States, uncontrollable, dams breaking, and so on, they will get a lot of sympathy. If even in the middle of a meeting, the president says, I've got to go, this is happening, they will get a lot of sympathy. But this, because you need to be there to, you have a vice president, come on, you could leave enough specific instructions. This is how far you can go in negotiating with the Republicans. In the meantime, for strategic, military reasons of our interest, I have to stay in, the South Pacific and deal with our alliances there, because after all, part of the objective is to contain China. Yes, the Republicans may try to use that against you in the forthcoming election, but I think that the average American is basically sensible enough to know that the Republicans wouldn't have a case, a leg to stand on. But you go, spend the day, and then you start flying back. All drama. And at the end, we know what is going to happen. At the 99th minute, 99th second, they will reach an agreement about that debt ceiling that will make America not default. So that's my take on that.
How about the choice of Hiroshima as a location for the G7 summit that's coming up? What do you think about that, sir?
It's a way of saying sorry to the Japanese without actually saying so in so many words. So it's a way of saying sorry to the Japanese. I'm not really sure that the South Koreans are completely on board in this rapprochement with Japan. I think the grievances felt by the South Koreans during the Japanese occupation is still very, very deep. However, given the fear of North Korea, what is coming from there, the South Koreans may simply feel, well, they just have to swallow it. But in the case of the United States, I think it's an indirect way of apologizing to Japan for dropping the bomb on Hiroshima.
Before I go to Turkey and Pakistan, there is a note someone has sent me here, and I will ask, since I'm just the messenger. The person said that you seem to have some sympathy for Prince Harry, and they want to know your thoughts on the recent incident where he and his wife were chased by paparazzi in what has been described as something that could have ended in a massive crash for them. So I'm just the messenger, so I asked the question, sir.
Well, I mean, your intro or the intro from the person asking the question is quite right. That I have sympathy for Harry. Our forefathers have this proverb that whoever has witnessed a bolt of thunder or lightning striking the ground is not likely to take the god of thunder with levity. Now, what I've noticed is even the way how far the antagonists of Harry will go. Harry said what he said about the experience. And before you know it, they got hold of I'm not sure on what channel I saw it now, but I saw it on one channel. They got hold of a taxi driver in New York who said, oh, nothing of the sort happened. Oh, maybe there's just some form of exaggeration about this. You cannot speed on the streets of New York without police. No, nothing like that happened. And then there was a lady who was interviewed today who said, I witnessed it all. There was a lot of heckling by the paparazzi of Harry and Meghan before they got into their limousine, and their limousine were pursued by these photographers. Now, why will Harry lie? Why? Even if it was not as dramatic as he put it, flying at the back of this boy's mind is, here goes a Diana syndrome again. Because I was saying to somebody, why don't they just wait and say, okay, take all the photographs you want to take? But I didn't know that they were facing hostile photographers who were heckling them until I saw the interview of that lady who was saying, no, it was a nasty experience. It wasn't just, a minor thing. That boy's mind will fly back to how he lost his mother. I don't know what's going to happen, whether they themselves will now have to evaluate, or to use our language, that interrogate every invitation they get, and on security, consult security experts. Do we accept this, or do we turn this down on the basis of security, even if it is our own event? And in other words, even if it is one of the NGOs where they are sponsoring. But I mean, it's evil what those paparazzis did to that young couple. It is evil. And because when you know how crowded New York streets can be, and to have to race through that, avoiding people snapping, as I said, it's not just in Europe. Obviously, again, you see, we need to, when are we going to reevaluate our laws in terms of freedom of action? Do photographers really have unlimited freedom of action? For what? Under what justification? Because they are making a living by endangering your life and endangering their own life, where they may feel they are not endangering their own life. After all, it was only Diana and Dodi who died in that underpass. No photographer died. None. And they were not taken to court, even in Paris, where, secrecy was valued. They were not. And now it's spread all over the world, chasing you, motorcycles and this and that. And what for? I mean, it's not as if the two of them were doing something they shouldn't be doing. They were husband and wife. They were dressed. They were living a public event. So why chase after them? Why did they want to catch them kissing in the car, in the limousine, or what? Um, I of course, there will be the Harry, anti-Meghan people in London saying serves them right, serves them right, rather than showing again any sympathy. I mean, the news up till now has not shown whether his father picked up the phone and said, "How are you? How are things? I hope you've calmed down now." Nobody said anything. I don't expect William to make that call. He said, "Well, let me know. Let me not go." You are in London, so let me stop there.
Let me go to Turkey, sir, and Turkey, as they call it now, and talk about the presidential election there. At one point, given some of the things that Turkey has been doing recently and flexing their muscles somewhat as that emerging medium power country, as you refer to such countries recently, we've seen that he wasn't able to make the 50% and clear that threshold to come back, and they now have to go into a runoff. Number one, what does that mean for what does that mean for for Turkey and for Erdogan himself? And number two is what do you think his chances are in the runoff later on in the month?
Okay. Uh, Let me start by answering two questions which you didn't ask. The first question is this issue of uh, crossing the 50% threshold, which we have seen happen in the Brazilian election and now Turkish election. The issue of electoral college, which we have seen played up in the United States. How do we define when is democracy a democracy? And when is democracy not a democracy? There are other countries in the world where even if you make 25%, as long as you got to you breasted the tape first, to use the language of the British parliamentary system, you are declared the winner. I don't think any party in England had ever, as a party, crossed the 50% threshold. So when is an electoral system democratic and when is it not democratic? That's the first question. The second issue is that, in a way, I saw, unlike our own election here, I saw a definite demarcation between what the opposition was proposing and what Erdogan was proposing. So really the Turkish people were being given alternative choices, meaning Erdogan said he will continue his program of, as you rightly said, being a medium power, protecting the interest of Turkey, um, pursuing policies and goals which are clearly identifiable as Turkish. The opposition said the policies being pursued by Erdogan has moved too far to the left. That Turkey is a NATO country, Turkey is a European, Mediterranean, Asian country, and that all these interests must be factored together in coming up with a Turkish identity, different from the kind of identity that had been identified with Erdogan. No, there were two clearly identifiable foreign policies that were being put forward. And in domestic policy, the opposition didn't hide the feeling that they thought Erdogan has become too much of a dictator, had taken away too many of the rights of the Turkish people, and that the opposition, want to return the rights of the Turkish people and bring back more democracy. So the people then voted. I have listened to the reports of the observers, and quite clearly, while they felt that on election day, voters were allowed to freely cast their ballots, there was this feeling expressed by not just one group of observers, but by several who addressed that press conference, that in the period leading up to the election, the media was over-controlled by the ruling party, that there was too much exposure given to Erdogan, that there was that the opposition candidate was not allowed sufficient access to the media, and that at the counting centers, there was not enough not enough cleanliness in terms of how they were counting the votes. It was not too transparent. So, to finally come to your question, what will happen at the second round? I don't know. And I don't think anybody knows. The third candidate, there's always a spoiler. They have no chance in hell of winning the election, but they just want to be able to put in their CV, also ran for election. He got only 5%. But I understand that ideologically, he belongs to the right. And he's now asking both parties that he wants to be the bride, to be courted for the vote of that 5%. where would those votes go? I don't know.
Thank you very much for that, sir. I think we lost your video, so I will delay the question about Pakistan to next week, and we'll take that from next week, sir. Thank you very much for your time this evening, sir, and to our viewers, thank you very much for being there this evening.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you to our viewers. And on that note, we'll end the program tonight. Good night, sir.
Good night. Wakanda forever.
Yes, sir.